Hello, welcome to Archibald's Fine Firearms. How may I be of assistance? What's up, brother? I'm here to sell my Browning High Power. Fantastic. What a classic firearm. High polished blued steel frame, checkered walnut grips. I'm sure yours promises to be a Jesus, Mother, Mary, Joseph. It's pretty sweet, ain't it? What is this? A ghastly abomination. It's an affront to humanity. What the hell happened to it? Looks like the General Lee had sex with a John boat. General Lee having sex with a John boat. I'd watch that. Clearly not blued. That was more like a green-gray. Walnut grips seem to have been substituted for a very aggressive, very orange set of lock grips. Yeah, the other ones had termites. That tracks. I'm afraid from a collector's standpoint, this gun is of no value. You may be better served by Jimmy's Pawn down the street. Well, I see. I will take my wares elsewhere. Good day to you. Just one moment. Is that orange paint on the front side? May I? By all means. Curious. I mean, what are the chances? I mean, it'd be impossible. I mean, there's no way. So, was the previous owner Sir Robert Ross, perchance? You mean Iron Man? No, that's Robert Downey Jr. No, Sir Robert Ross was a painter. I don't know, man. He was some hippie. A big fro, a tree fetish. Bloody hell. This is Bob Ross's High Power. That means it's worth a lot of money? It's priceless. I'm prepared to offer you $400,000. Trade you for a stand-up jet ski. Deal. Boom, baby. That's how you wheel and deal. I'm so glad nobody showed up to the range 5 years ago when I shot that Bob Ross sketch. Can you imagine if you rolled up to a bay and there was a douche in head-to-toe Bob Ross garb with a paint palette in one hand and a High Power in the other, it just full sprint across the bay? Today we're covering the Browning High Power, about a year after everybody else on YouTube. Did I take this extra time to gather a bunch of data points and bring you guys a more holistic long-term review? Sure, let's go with that. In reality, I've been shooting this exact High Power for 20 years. I'm just late to the party. Before we dive in, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, the channel has now gotten popular enough that some scammer dickheads have been creating fake accounts with a profile picture exactly like my profile picture and commenting on your comments in the comments section. So if someone with a profile picture like me asks you to download some sketchy ass app or DM them or send them some money or titty pics or whatever, don't do it. Unless you've got really good titties. Also, huge thanks to Lock Grips for sending these badass grip panels out. They are legit amazing, have helped a ton with this High Power. More on that in a bit. And finally, if you think the base pads on these High Power mags are badass, well, that's awesome, because I designed and machined them myself. They're for sale right now on my website, link in the description. I'll also have a more in-depth video on them coming out shortly. Cliff notes. Tons of people have polymer striker-fired pistols or some sort of CZ or some sort of 1911 variant, but not everybody has a Browning High Power. Showing up to the range with a Browning High Power is kind of like being that guy that's way into vinyl. It's a little hipstery, but if you outshoot people with the OG Wonder 9 that's been basically unchanged for the past 100 years, that's not douchey, that's awesome. This is an FN Browning High Power made in Belgium in 1980. And without getting too much into the history, you have three main types. You've got pre-1962-ish, which has an internal extractor. You have post-1962, which has an external extractor, and I would say also includes all of the clones like the current production Springfield Armory SA-35. And then you've got the 2022 FN Browning High Power, which looks kind of like a Browning High Power. It's made by FN, it's named Browning High Power, but it shares basically none of the parts of a Browning High Power. It's a complete redesign. What we're talking about today is the post-1962 FN Browning High Powers. Huzzah! In this video, I'm going to be making a lot of comparisons between the Browning High Power and my short dust cover CZ75 Shadow. And before your heads explode, let me make this massive caveat and disclaimer. The Browning High Power was released in 1935, and in 2022, it is still a fantastic pistol, which just shows you how amazing of a gun this thing must have been whenever it was released almost 100 years ago. It was the OG double stack Wonder 9. It's fucking amazing. The CZ75 was released 40 years later and is essentially an improved Browning High Power, and then this Shadow was released in the early 2000s, so it had another 30 to 40 years of improvement on the CZ75. So I'm not by any means saying that this is a fair comparison. I just want to give you a modern day reference if you've played around with a CZ or a Tankfolio and you haven't played around with a high power, so that you've got something to reference. And I think it goes without saying, the CZ75 would not exist if the Browning high power had not been invented. There, now you can all take a deep sigh of relief and not freak the fuck out, and we can continue with the video. Right off the bat, what is this thing like to shoot? It's great. It's light, it's quick, it's very pointable. You've got a long sight radius, an all steel frame. The trigger is single action only, and it's very positive, very predictable. So all these things lead it to be a very easy pistol to shoot. It's a little snappier than my CZ75 Shadow, and that's to be expected. It's about a quarter pound lighter. In competition, I don't shoot this high power as fast as I shoot my CZ75, but I shoot it more accurately. And this could be a couple different things. It could be because the front sight's a little harder to pick up, and so I'm focusing more on my front sight rather than having a target focus. It could also be that I'm focusing a little more on where to place my support hand thumb, more on that later. But long story short is, I'm not shooting the stage as quickly, but I'm getting more points per stage. The Browning High Power's grip frame is the same width as a grip frame for the CZ75, but then they step it down, and the forward portion of the grip frame is skinnier so that it can ride within the slide, whereas on the CZ75, the grip frame is the same width all the way forward so that the slide rides within the grip frame instead of the grip frame riding within the slide. This is often talked about when people are discussing mechanical accuracy. In my experience, I can't tell the difference. This is me shooting a pretty shitty group from about 12 yards. I finally get it going towards the end, but long story short, I can't tell a mechanical accuracy difference between these two pistols. It will outshoot you. The biggest issue that I have with the Browning High Power is that it just feels cramped, which is not super surprising. It's a military issued weapon. Military weapons are always kind of designed so that the smallest people can use it effectively. It's why an M1 Garand is a gigantic fucking rifle, but it's got this tiny ass length of pull, and so short people can shoot it, right? Same thing, I'm assuming, with a high power, is so that people with smaller hands can use it. Not to mention the fact this thing was released in 1935, right? This is the middle of the Great Depression. You got people with little tiny breadline hands. May I have a crouton and a pistol that fits these tiny, tiny fingers? It's really apparent when you stack it up against a full-size CZ75. The barrel lengths are the same, but the frame is shorter. It's basically like a compact frame with a full-size slide, like this Cadet conversion. Another thing that jumps out at you is that the trigger guard is smaller and pushed rearward. I guess another way to say it is that a CZ75 trigger guard is enlarged and pushed forward, but you know what I'm trying to say. Also, the trigger guard itself is rounded and smooth and kind of slippery with no undercut at the transition of the back bottom of the trigger guard and the front top portion of the front strap of the frame. The safety feels cramped and crowded, and it's physically further back and smaller. So this is kind of a big deal for me because this is a single action only gun, right? You're carrying this thing cocked and locked, so you have to sweep the safety every time you go to shoot this gun. So if the safety was a little further forward, if maybe the safety was enlarged a little bit and didn't feel so cramped, that would just be better placement for me. There's this little kind of micro attempt at a beaver tail, which is absolutely better than nothing. But because it is so short, I end up like catching the webbing between my fingers on the draw sometimes. So sometimes I'll go in, kind of expect that beaver tail to catch the webbing and guide it down. But because this is short and stubby, I'll just like jam my webbing into the back of this beaver tail. The front and back of the grip frame on the Browning High Power is smooth, and there's no like little transition scoop at the bottom. It's straight all the way to the bottom of the grip frame. On the CZs, they've got kind of like that little knee scoop thing in there. That's not there on the High Power. The actual grip frame width itself is identical between the High Power and the CZ75, and they're pretty much the same length. The big difference though is that the 75s have a tighter radius on the front and back of the grip frame. So the front strap and the back strap is actually a tighter radius. And since it's a larger radius on the High Power, it makes it feel kind of blocky in comparison. It makes it feel fatter. It's actually not physically fatter, it just makes it feel fatter because it's a more abrupt transition. The magwell on the Browning High Power is tight as a motherfucker. You have to be perfect. Mag changes are a bitch. You have to really, really pay attention to what you're doing. Not only is there no chamfer in there, there's no bevel, there's no giant magwell, but the front to back portion, a lot of times on modern firearms, you're gonna see like kind of a half moon cutout to accept if you're not perfectly in line, if you don't hang up a bullet or anything else. On this one, it is a squared off mag well with very little room for error. So you got to be Johnny on the spot with your reloads. And by far the biggest issue that I cause for myself while shooting a Browning high power is the location of my support hand thumb. When I'm shooting a CZ75, I'm resting my support hand thumb on the side of the frame forward of the slide stop. So this is great. It's right here. I've got a little bit of downward pressure. There's plenty of room for it. It just naturally falls there. It's perfect. When I try to do the same thing with the Browning high power, it actually lands right on the very front of the slide stop because the Browning high power's slide stop's a little bit longer and it's pushed a little bit further forward. This wouldn't be that big of an issue if you don't move it at all, but if you apply any downward pressure, you end up with a very serious problem. The slide stop on a Browning high power has the pivot that goes through the frame kind of in the middle, or not perfectly in the middle, but close enough, right? It's towards the middle, so it's like a seesaw. On a CZ75, the pivot is all the way up at the front. So even if you rested your thumb on it, it's really not gonna do anything. But because it's in the middle, if you put any downward pressure right here, this thing seesaws up and it goes into slide lock while you're shooting it, regardless of how many rounds are in the magazine. So I have done this so many fucking times. Hey there, welcome to How to Look Like a Dipshit 101. Oh, you did that in public. That's embarrassing. I probably won't do it again. Oh, there it is. Well, it can't be a third time. Jesus Christ, go home already. Oh, look, what the slide's locked back. There you go. Yep, better. Okay, all right. And yeah, let's stare at it. I'm sure that'll fix it. All right, see you next time. So if you're used to replacing your support hand thumb on the side of the frame and applying any downward pressure, you gotta cure yourself of that on the Browning high power, or you will go into slide lock. Let's talk about reliability. When a Browning high power is reasonably clean and properly maintained, they are extremely reliable. Very, very, very reliable. My experience, because I'm an asshole and took way too long to do the thing I needed to do, has been a little different. I'm gonna give you some advice, bringing it close here. If you buy an older used firearm and you run into any reliability problems that aren't immediately solved by something simple like a new magazine, do yourself a favor, detail strip it, clean the shit out of everything, replace every single spring in the gun, and replace every single wear item immediately. Trust me, you're gonna thank yourself. You know how many range trips and how much just wasted ammo and time and ruined stages at a competition and just bottled up rage you're gonna save yourself. Just do that. So this was a used pistol when I got it, and the previous owner had done some stuff to it. The magazine disconnect was removed, which is great because magazine disconnects are so fucking stupid. It is a very, very dumb solution in search of a non-existent problem. So I had no problems that the magazine disconnects were gone. The trigger was great. I could tell there was a slightly lighter recoil spring in there. It had a set of Bomar sights, and I don't know whether this one was originally cut for Bomar sights or not. And then the obvious thing was that this entire gun had been Parkerized. And to my knowledge, there weren't any Parkerized Browning high powers out there. So I don't know whether this thing just had been shot so much that the finish was gone and so this guy had it parked, or whether it was some kind of dealer special or what. And no telling how many rounds had gone through this thing. A quick history of issues that I've had with this gun over the past 20 years. And once again, all of this is on me for not properly maintaining. It has nothing to do with this particular gun or Browning high powers. All of this is fixed with just general baseline maintenance. Number one, misdiagnosed some ejection issues for bad magazines. Went in, replaced the magazine springs, didn't solve it. So I went in and replaced the magazines. Got some Metgar mags, love them, glad I have them, but it wasn't the root of the issue. The issues persisted. I went in and removed the extractor and cleaned all the gunk that was in the extractor channel that was preventing the extractor from coming all the way down. Continued to work for a little while, and then had more ejection and extraction issues. Went in, replaced the extractor spring, and that helped for a while until it didn't. Then realized that the extractor claw had become worn because a combination of probably it being held off a little bit to the side because of all the shit that was underneath there, and then also a weak extractor spring. Every time it was ripping over that rim, it was wearing the extractor claw down and down and down. Finally, it just wore out or chipped, or I can't remember what the fuck was the matter with it. Anyway, extractor gets replaced. Then it runs fine for a little while. Then I'm noticing some ejection issues because the it's flinging them way, way, way too far, and I'm worried that the gun is beating itself to death. So I replace the main recoil spring. Well, I replaced it with a recoil spring that's too heavy for the reloads that I was shooting at the time, and so now it's short stroking. So get the correct recoil spring in there. That solves problems for a little while. Then I run into issues where it will extract, but it will actually retain the case under the extractor claw and not actually fling it out of the gun. That turned out to be a worn ejector blade, which is almost imperceptible. Like when you wear the ejector blade down on this, I couldn't even tell. I mean, we're talking maybe 10 thou, maybe 15 thousandths. I mean, I guess technically you could see it with the human eye, but I did not see any perceivable wear on there. So I replaced the ejector blade, and I think that was the oh yeah, the fucking chamber cracked. I'm kidding. Browning high powers have a 2-piece barrel, but the first time I saw that, I almost shit my pants. When I detail stripped this pistol so that I could install the new ejector blade on there, I pulled the original safety out. Now, the safety on this gun has always been mushy. It's supposed to have a ball to tin. It's supposed to like click, positive, click into place, click out of place. And it always just been kind of mush. And I had assumed that was a Browning high power thing. I was very fucking wrong, because whenever I pulled this safety out of the gun, this is what I saw. What in the Alabama muffler shop nightmare is I have seen prison shanks that were carved with more care than this thing. I don't know whether the original owner tried to get fancy and do some fitting, or whether this thing was just out of spec from the get-go and started to gall inside the gun, but that is terrifying, especially because this is a single action only pistol that you have to carry condition 1, cocked and locked. And so for that, for a safety that you actually legitimately need to be that fucked up is terrifying. Can we talk about how sketchy that is for a second? It looks like the faulty part the NTSB would hold up after like a train derailment. Or like some guy from OSHA comes up and he's like, this 30-cent part led to the release of 9,000 pounds of schmegma number 6 into the greater New Jersey area that claimed the lives of 22 innocent individuals. Don't let this happen to you. Only you can prevent forest fires. Change the safety, or at least check it in your firearm to make sure it's not a fucking piece of shit. Of all of the modifications that you could do to a Browning high power, the top 2 would be improved sights, which for me, I'm kind of fucked because that front sight blade is like brazed to the slide. It is a permanent sight. I do not have the option of replacing it. And grip panels. Grip panels are fucking huge. The original grips that came on this, or at least I think the original grips that were on there, the ones that I got when I got the gun, were checkered walnut that were at least 3 decades old and had soaked up more oil than the Exxon Valdez had spilled. What was originally sharp cut checkering had kind of worn down. I mean, it's walnut. So if you were just going to shoot an indoor match and you had super dry hands, you were okay. But if you were shooting an outdoor match and it was even remotely warm, or your hands were even remotely sweaty, or God forbid you had like sunscreen on your hands or something, it was almost impossible to hold on to this gun because the front portion of the grip has no checkering on it, right? The front strap is smooth, the back strap is smooth, the trigger guard is super rounded and smooth, there is no undercut, and now I've got these oil-soaked, not so sharp walnut grips. It was very difficult to shoot. Like there's, I'll roll in some footage of the day, one of the days I shot this, it was like 95 degrees outside and 65% humidity, and I was sweating my ass off, and I was having a legit hard time holding onto this pistol, and it's not even that it recoils that much. It's just, it was super slippery. So I put some lock grips onto here, and it has changed everything. I reached out to Lock, I got a set of the thin bogeys, and I got a set of the palm swell bogeys. And normally I would just be a palm swell bogey guy, but like I was talking about, that kind of wider radius on the front and back strap makes this gun feel kind of blocky. I typically don't like thin grips, but I actually really like running the thin grips on this. I also really liked the palm swells, and I got to the point where I was like, I kind of like aspects of both. And then I had the amazing idea that a ton of other people have already done of running a thin grip on your support hand side and a palm swell on your dominant hand. And so I run a palm swell bogey on the right side of my gun and a thin bogey on the left side, and it is actually fucking awesome. So These have been super badass. I really, really enjoy them. I also have a pair of lock Veloces on my CZ75, and those are really great. I think I probably like the texture of the Veloces more than the bogies, but I don't mind the bogies at all. I know a lot of people are like, oh, they hurt my hands. Dude, they don't. They're fine. But if Lock ever makes a set of Veloces for the high power, I would absolutely get them because they're awesome. All right, wrapping all of this up, the Browning High Power is a fantastic pistol. It is great. It is, what makes it even greater is the fact that it was almost designed 100 years ago and it is still this good. If I was going out and buying a new single action steel frame pistol today, would I buy a Browning High Power? Probably not. I'd probably buy a single action CZ75. Having said that, I love that I have this pistol. It is something different. It's super cool. They're great. If you own one, you already know how cool they are. And if you've never shot one, treat yourself. Go out, shoot one. You're gonna have a fucking blast. They're super, super cool. All right, thank you guys so much. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really, really, really means a lot. Drop a comment below. And also link in the description for my website where you guys are gonna see more and more products coming out. Thanks.